It's a new year, and Deion Sanders will have a new defensive coordinator in 2024. I'm going to talk about what happened with Charles Kelly and who could step in as possible replacements.
You are Locked On Buffs, your daily podcast on the Colorado Buffaloes. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome to Locked On Buffs. I am your host, Kevin Borber. Today's episode of Locked On Buffs is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more. Right now, new customers can get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 moneyline bet. That's $150 if your team wins. Visit FanDuel.com/LockedOnCollege or /LockedOn to get started. We are also brought to you by the Locked On Podcast Network. It's your team every day for free and available wherever you get your podcasts. So thank you for making me your first listen of the day. I appreciate you guys. Hope you guys had a happy and safe new year. Happy holidays as well if you haven't been around since, but I appreciate you guys for tuning in. What's new around Colorado? Well, I'll tell you. Let's see, it was a few days ago now, before the holiday, December 30th, Colorado ended up losing defensive coordinator Charles Kelly to Auburn. So I think, as normal, everyone wants to paint the picture of, oh, Deion Sanders is losing it. Everything's going bad. Everything's doing this. It's the ship is sinking in Boulder, and that's not true. I think it's unfortunate to lose Coach Kelly because he was such an elite recruiter. He had a lot of potential as a coach. I think we really never got to see what a defense coached by him was capable of, because honestly, that defense was learning so much as they were going. They didn't have the personnel they needed. There was just a lot wrong with what they had. And to throw all the blame on him for why their defense was bad would be kind of a stretch. Same thing with the offense and Sean Lewis or Pat Shermer. I just don't think they had the pieces necessary to be good. But I digress. He took a job at Auburn to be the co-defensive coordinator. A lot of people are shocked by this move. He is from Ozark, Alabama, which that's where I don't know where Auburn is actually, like how close that is to Auburn, but I'll put it up on my little handy dandy map here. Because realistically, he's from Ozark, Alabama. He played defensive back at Auburn, so it's pretty much down the road from him. It's not one of those like shocking moves. So yeah, Ozark, Alabama and Auburn University are about 2 hours away from each other. So he's about 2 hours from where he grew up. He started his career at Central Alabama High School, was a GA at Auburn in 1993, then went to Jacksonville State, Henderson State, another high school in Alabama, Nickel State, which is in, I think, New Orleans or Louisiana. I know it's in Louisiana. I don't think it's in New Orleans. Georgia Tech, Florida State, which is where he kind of started picking up. Worked with Florida State when they won the championship, then Tennessee, then Alabama for 2019 to 2022, and then took the Colorado job. So losing him, not too shocking, especially since you lost him to his alma mater and his hometown. So I don't think he's going to be the head coach at Auburn anytime soon, but it's a return to home. I think a lot of people don't realize, too, when coaches change jobs, there's a lot more factors that go into it than people realize. Maybe he didn't like Boulder, Obviously, I think he loved working for Coach Prime. He's a Southern guy. All of his jobs up until this point, the most west he had been, I guess you could say, was maybe Georgia Tech or Tennessee, I think, would be the most west he'd been. So he's not really a West Coast or Midwest, whatever you would consider Colorado to be. He's not really whatever region this is, he's not that guy. And so it doesn't shock me. With him, the defense I think the secondary had bright moments where they forced a lot of turnovers, but the defense as a whole, 127th in total defense, 107th in rush defense, and 124 in the country in passing yards allowed. Again, I think that's more of a testament to not really the coaching, because obviously the secondary has him and Coach Prime to work with, and they still struggled. But I don't think Colorado had the players necessary. I think Travis Hunter was really good on defense for them. And then everyone else, it's like, I think every one of Colorado's starters on defense could be replaced by a transfer. I really do. I don't think there's a single person that started this year on the defense outside of Travis Hunter, and like if you have one in the comments, let me know below. I think of their 11 starters, maybe Trevor Woods too, but even then he ended up moving to linebacker, so obviously he wasn't indispensable at safety. I don't think a single one of those 10 players outside of Travis Hunter will have a for sure starting spot next year. They're going to bring in a lot of guys, the Houston transfer, the Pitt transfer. They're bringing in the Liberty transfer at corner or at safety, wherever he ends up. But they brought in so many new guys. And I think that this team lacks depth. I think this team lacked experience. They had a guy like Travis Jay, who was a safety at Florida State, reserve safety, mind you. They had him playing corner against Troy Franklin in Oregon, and he was getting absolutely torched. They had Cormani McClain, who's a true freshman that clearly wasn't ready. We saw this in the doc a handful of times. Was not ready for the moment. Was not prepared for college football, which is fine. He's a freshman. But he was trying to play a lot. Omarion Cooper was a guy from Florida State that was somewhat of a starter or a key contributor that ended up losing his role. He was the second main corner outside of Travis Hunter. So they just had a lot of guys. Their defensive line, it was Bishop Thomas was supposed to be like a key guy. He had 6 total tackles in the doc. He clearly had some off the field issues, meetings he wasn't attending. Amari McNeil comes from Tennessee as a backup. Leonard Payne comes from Fresno State. I mean, he was solid. Shane Cokes comes from the FCS. He was at Dartmouth. Jordan Dominic, he was solid at Arkansas. I thought he would have had a bigger role. Derek McClendon, same thing. Came from Florida State, was pretty solid. Didn't really do much. So, and linebackers. Demoy Kennedy didn't play much. Levante Bentley was a starter, lost a spot. Juwan Mitchell could have been better, but obviously he was having issues staying on the field, which, I mean, it was his 4th school in like 2.5 years. He went from Texas to Tennessee to Arizona State for a week before they kicked him off the team, and then Colorado. And then the safeties, it was Trevor Woods, who I thought was pretty good at times. And then it was Shiloh Sanders, excuse me. I take that back. Shiloh and Travis, only 2 that are keeping their spots. Everyone else, I would say, up for grabs. I can't believe I forgot Shiloh. Had to work my way there. But yeah, I think you have 9 open spots available for starters next year. It is what it is. I just don't think that this defense had the playmakers necessary. Charles Kelly's a Auburn guy. He's a SEC guy. I think a lot of people kind of forgot just how good he was, but he was recruiter of the year prior to his first season at Colorado, 24/7 Sports Recruiter of the Year. He's recruited a lot of big names. I think he's a huge addition for Auburn. I think he's going to help them recruit some huge names if he stays there. And I think he's going to help. I think he could have helped Colorado get some bigger names and more stability on defense. But where do they go now? There's 2 names that stand out in my head based on the hints that we've got. But first, a word from our sponsors over at FanDuel. This episode of Locked on Buffs is brought to you by our sponsors over at FanDuel. Right now, new customers can get $150 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place a $5 bet. The NFL regular season is wrapping up, but there's still time to get in on the action with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Again, $5. New customers, they get $150 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place a $5 bet. That's $150 in bonus bets, win or lose. So the app is easy to use, and there's so many different ways to bet, like same game parlays. Find bets in the new Explore tab is a new feature that a lot of people are trying, and it's really fun. Make sure to check it out. Make a parlay in the Parlay Hub, the best way to find popular parlays, and they got more options, so go check it out. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and make your first bet a layup. FanDuel is the official partner of the NFL. Who's going to replace Charles Kelly? I have 2 names that come to mind right away. I think one of the more obvious names is Mike Zimmer. Obviously, he's on staff already. He is someone who was hired in January. So this is kind of like a little breakdown. He's 67 years old, but was a former NFL coach. He has a ton of experience. He was the head coach of the Vikings for 8 years. Deion Sanders hired him in 2022. He was a defensive analyst for Jackson State. They were obviously, they go way back too. He was Coach Prime's position coach back in the 90s with the Dallas Cowboys, which is a long time ago. He was hired this past season not really in a known capacity. I don't think he had like a title, but obviously he's someone who has a lot of experience at the coaching ranks. He has a lot of success as a coach. And I think if you guys know Charles Reed from 24/7, he said that when he spoke to Deion Sanders, that the new coach was going to bring an NFL feel. So that's why I kind of go here. So this is Mike Zimmer's coaching career. Was at Missouri, defensive assistant, Weber State as a linebackers and defensive backs coach. Washington State was his first defensive coordinator's job. Then he was hired as a Dallas Cowboys assistant. He was a nickel coach, then the defensive backs coach, then the defensive coordinator from 2000 to 06. Atlanta Falcons defensive coordinator for 2007. The Bengals defensive coordinator from 2008 to 2013. Hired as the Vikings head coach from 2014 to 2021, and then 2022 he was hired as a analyst slash consultant as at Jackson State. So he's been all over. He knows the college level. He hasn't recruited in a while, but I think I like the fact that he has some college coaching experience. Obviously, he's been around the college game for this past year. So even if he's not involved with recruiting or other stuff like that, he knows that there's major changes. I think that's a kind of like a safe hire for Coach Prime. It's someone who he trusts. It's someone who he knows. And I think Coach Prime likes familiarity. We saw that with Pat Shurmur. He said him and Pat Shurmur agreed on a lot of things. And obviously, Pat Shurmur is probably likely the offensive coordinator. One of those things where it's just familiarity, which is a good thing. And a lot of people take it for granted. Another name that stands out to me is Ed Reed. So Ed Reed is obviously NFL legend. He was the Baltimore Ravens safety. He was just that guy, part of those Miami teams when I was around, let's see, when did he play at Miami? 2000, early 2000s. So I was like 2 or 3 or 1, I guess, at 2000. But Ed Reed, hard-hitting safety, was almost the head coach at Bethune-Cookman. Literally, it didn't go well. For some reason, he did not appreciate what was going on there, called him out, and his tenure ended there. So he's someone who I think would bring an interesting dynamic. He doesn't really have a lot of coaching experience. He worked as the assistant defensive backs coach for the Bills back in 2016. And then he was hired as an administrator at Miami. He was named chief of staff and then senior football advisor. And then he was hired at Bethune-Cookman, like I said, as the head coach for, I don't even know, a whole week or so. This is kind of the breakdown. It says on December 27th, Reed was hired as the new head coach of Bethune-Cookman. Before he officially became the coach of Bethune-Cookman, him and the team parted ways. Bethune-Cookman declined to ratify the contract on January 21st, 2023. So like a month later, or less than a month later, which vacated the football team's head coaching position prior to his dismissal. Reed recorded a live stream, which he criticized the condition of the school's athletic facilities. In the wake of the decision, Reed continued his criticism of the university, saying, "I'm not withdrawing my name, as they say. They don't want me here. They do not want me here because I tell the truth." And so clearly they had a lot of issues going on there that maybe they didn't want uncovered or something. But Ed Reed, I think he would bring an intensity. I think even though he's never really recruited in a sense, I think having Ed Reed as your defensive coordinator, while it'd be a big ask for someone who's never coached the defensive coordinators, or who has never been the coach, who's never coached defensive coordinators, who's never been a defensive coordinator. He has some coaching experience. He's an NFL great. He has some sort of knowledge. I think he could help out in recruiting. He's more of a younger guy in terms of a lot of these kids, at least know of him. Ed Reed played during my youth, so I'm sure I'm around the same age as most of these college kids and maybe a little bit older. Some of them are older than me, though, because he's 6th or 7th years guys. But he last played in 2013. So a lot of these guys were probably in their 10 to 12 range, those kids. Probably actually 8 to 10. Either way, they know who Ed Reed is. They respect him. He's one of the greats. Him and Coach Prime would probably be quite the interesting duo. He's an intense guy, passionate guy. I think Coach Prime would love an opportunity to help out a friend. I think he'd love an opportunity to have someone who's strict and bought in and kind of very outspoken be on the staff. I just don't know if that's where he's going, but I think those are the two options that make the most sense to me because realistically, at this time, you kind of have to find someone who fits your identity. Which, if you're Coach Prime, I don't know if Charles Kelly and Coach Prime always saw eye to eye in terms of like the attention that he got. I think not that Charles Kelly wanted the attention. I think Charles Kelly doesn't want the attention. When I met him in Boulder, he literally just seemed like he just wants to coach football, recruit, and go home type of guy. He did not like or this is what it kind of seemed to me. Wasn't a fan of the on the camera stuff, or wasn't a fan of all the media hoopla. Reminded me a lot of Nick Saban in the sense where it's like he's just there to coach football and that's it. That's all he wants to do. And I think maybe that's why he left as a part of a reason. But I think Ed Reed would handle that really well. I think Mike Zimmer would handle it well in the sense that he kind of would just focus on coaching and obviously letting Coach Prime do the rest, and in terms of handling the on-screen stuff. But those are the two options that make the most sense to me. I don't know who else I think who would jump at this position right now. I think it'll be interesting to see who. We haven't really heard any names outside of these two. I haven't heard any names outside of these two. So it'd be interesting to see where Coach Prime goes. But nonetheless, it's always an adventure in Boulder. So we will have to wait and see. When we come back, I'm going to talk about the Pac-12 Commissioner George Kliavkoff's last disrespect or blatant disrespect to the conference and what happened and his failed job. But before we do, we're going to take a quick break. Thank you guys for tuning in to Locked on Buffs and making me your first listen of the day. We're free and available wherever you get your podcast. Appreciate you guys. Make sure to like, subscribe, follow. Okay. Obviously, if you guys are a college football fan, you know Washington beat Texas yesterday in the Sugar Bowl. Alabama beat Michigan in the Rose Bowl. And standing on stage with Washington for their trophy presentation was none other than Mr. George Kliavkoff, the Pac-12 commissioner, soon to be former Pac-12 commissioner probably. And he had an interesting message or interesting sentiment for Pac-12 fans because obviously they kind of interviewed him. They always interview the commissioners to talk about like their programs or whatever, or people talked. He interviewed with 24/7 and Yahoo after the game. So you knew people were going to come after him and ask him questions because he kind of ghosted this entire year. He kind of just disappeared and fell off the face of the earth. And it was like, okay, what went wrong with him? Like, where did he go? And just one of those things where it's like, oh, he's gone. Nice. But he was asked about the Pac-12 or something, or asked about Washington, and he said, happy for the kids. They don't deserve all the nonsense going on around them. We were focused on rebuilding football. It took 2.5 years. I wish it would have happened quicker. If some of our schools would have been a little more patient, it would have paid off. And I see these comments and I roll my eyes and I laugh and I just I get a little angry, Pac-12 network, my first job out of college. It was one of those things where obviously a lot of people have been laid off. A lot of people will lose their jobs because of his inability to get a media rights deal. The Pac-12 had an entire year, essentially. USC and UCLA left. The Pac-12 had an entire year to replace them. They could have added San Diego State. They could have added SMU. They could have added Colorado State. They could have added UNLV, Tulane, whoever. You name it. They could have added anyone. They could have added 5 Mountain West schools. They chose to not do anything. They chose to figure things out and try to get a media rights deal, which is fine if you had an actual timeline. They had no timeline. It constantly changed, and they really had no semblance of a deal. They had some professor tell them they were valued at $50 million or something like that, and ended up not coming anywhere close. I think their best offer was like 30-ish million. And they basically talked themselves out of the negotiating room into their own deathbed. And for him to have the gall to come up there and say, if they were more patient, it would have worked out. Yeah, you say that now after the Pac-12 had its best football year, maybe of my lifetime, but you didn't do your job. You set the conference up for failure. You did not put them in a position to succeed. They should have expanded first. They should have added more schools. They should have figured out a way to keep the conference alive by any means necessary. Colorado was the team that kind of got it started. The second wave of teams leaving because they wanted to see what the deal was, and there was no deal present, and they left. So for him to say that, really absurd. I think he'll go down, or the Pac-12 management over the past decade will go down as one of the biggest fails in sports. And the Pac-12's kind of demise is helping lead to what is looking like a very unfortunate future of college football with super conferences where we don't recognize the sport anymore. So shout out to George. You did great. Way to pass the blame along. It wasn't your fault at all. Sure, we'll go with that. Either way, that's what college football has become. It's just one of those things where it's like, you didn't let me cook. You didn't give me the chance. And if I was still doing this or whatever, it would have been different. Either way, what's done is done. The Pac-12 is now the Pac-2. They will now have a chance to rebuild and get to 8 teams over the next couple of years. But the conference, I don't think should have died. It's really unfortunate what happened, but that has been the cards that they were dealt, and life goes on. I appreciate you guys for tuning in to Locked On Buffs and making me your first listen of the day. We're free and available wherever you get your podcast. Make sure to like, subscribe, and follow. We're going to continue our coverage throughout the offseason. It's going to be awesome. Hope you guys stick around. Have some fun with us. It's going to be a blast. We're going to have some cool interviews coming up, and you guys won't want to miss those. Hope you guys have a great day, and I'll see you guys tomorrow.